Hello, my name is Brenda and this is You Are Not Alone, the show for news, tips, and above all, stories of hope for those struggling with substance use disorder. Today's show is focused on the family. For parents, identifying and helping a child recover from substance use disorder can be very confusing. Treatment and recovery from this disease and how to find the resources can be downright overwhelming. Not to mention the stigma attached to substance use disorder, which in many cases, through shame and embarrassment, keeps families suffering in silence, not knowing how to get help for their child or for themselves. And where do parents turn when they think or realize something is not quite right emotionally with their child? They may be dealing with mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. These are all concerns facing our children in society today. Although I see a slow shift with the increased awareness of mental health, the stigma, shame, and embarrassment still exist. But the good news is I'm here to tell you there is no need to despair or feel hopeless. Help is available. Conversations with and between parents are key and happening in our communities. My guest today has been fearlessly addressing these concerns and so many other challenges facing our children today. Through her work, she offers resources, help, and above all, hope for those families who may be feeling alone and helpless. I am so pleased and excited that today I get to welcome my guest, Kim Porter. Kim is a certified family recovery specialist and the executive director of Be Part of the Conversation. We are so happy, and with further ado, Kim, thank you for being here on You Are Not Alone.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brenda.
I couldn't be more excited to have you here. Before we get started with what you're doing, can you give us background about yourself and what led you to Be a Part of the Conversation?
Sure. My background is I have a journalism degree. I was a graphic designer and marketer most of my adult life. And in 2010, we became aware, very harshly aware, that our son had a substance use disorder. It had been escalating, but it really peaked in 2010 when really what brought us into action with his addiction, which we weren't, I don't think, even ready to name, were two friends who basically outed him to us. They came to us and said, we're really worried about Daniel's substance use and drug use, and we jumped into action. They told us a lot that we didn't know about what was going on with his use. Right. So we, just through happenstance, came across an interventionist who helped us to understand that he needed inpatient treatment. We conducted an intervention. Within 2 weeks of that phone call from the friends, we had the intervention conducted. Daniel was in treatment, and amazingly, he has been sober ever since, which is 12 years now, which is just amazing.
Great. But during that time, did you feel any sense of trepidation, about the stigma, or what do we do, or how do we navigate this?
Yeah, the stigma definitely kept me isolated, as it does so many families, I now understand. And it also, we weren't ready to see it in our son, so that really what I identify as a barrier was we took him to a therapist, but it was the wrong therapist.
Okay.
She's a perfectly good therapist,
sure.
but she didn't understand addiction.
Right.
And Daniel had already had a couple of things happen in college. He was, by the way, he was 21 at the time that all this escalated. He had already been through 2 years of college, didn't go well. The second year, just everything really escalated. The substance use escalated, and the grades dropped, and he left. He had some trouble there. He got caught for smoking cannabis in his dorm room, so he got kicked out of his dorm. I, of course, flew out there to the rescue. He was in Arizona. I was helping him find an apartment. I mean, things I would not recommend doing these days, now that I understand what I understand. But I really wasn't ready to see it, nor was his dad. And so we took him to see this therapist who basically told us we were overreacting. Come on, didn't you guys get high in college?
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
In front of him, so it totally validated
what he was doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, wrong counselor.
Right, which we didn't know. We weren't ready, and I wish, and this is what I often will recommend to families now, is don't be afraid to have your loved one see someone who is an expert and maybe can rule out the worst case scenario, in this case, drug addiction. But that's what it was, and we weren't prepared to face it, and we missed an opportunity, you know, to find him some help earlier. It was only later that when things really, you know, and that was not a huge bottom for him. It was a bottom for me. I was not able to watch him deteriorate any longer.
So, hence,
so
this catapulted you forward to do more.
Right, and it was just also another kind of a really beautiful alignment of the stars, because I was working, so he went off to treatment in 2010, but at the time I was working for Hepper-Horsham School District's Educational Foundation, working on marketing and that sort of thing with them. So I was getting staff emails, and they said, we want to revamp our drug and alcohol program. They came up with the name, be a part of the conversation. And I said, oh, I'll do the logo. I'll help you to market this and bring people together. And when I told them my personal story, they were like, oh, you're doing more than that, you know? So,
hook, line, and sinker, they got you.
I just loved the idea of raising awareness with families who were in the crisis that we found ourselves in just a year before. And once you know what's out there for resources, for treatment, for support groups, all of it, wow, I wanted other families to know this too.
Sure. That was wonderful. It was just fell in your lap, and it was
really
meant to be. That's great. What a story. That's fabulous. So Be a Part of Conversation is born. And how long ago was this again?
That was in 2011.
Okay. So through the years, it has morphed into something so much bigger than you probably would have ever imagined.
I never guessed.
No. So go through, like what it is. I know substance use disorder and addiction was the thrust of this, drug and alcohol. And then from that, it evolved into so much more. So what other aspects of the program is there?
I think it's helpful to understand too, the way it grew was starting in one community. As we were having these community events and people were showing up from neighboring communities and school districts, they were saying like, can you come and do this up in Central Bucks or over here and over there? And I'm like, we can't, it belongs to the school district. So that's why we transferred the intellectual property to an incorporation. We formed a board of directors. We became a nonprofit organization. And so then we were at liberty to engage with other communities. So now fast forward, you know, we've been in 5 counties. So we have contracts with 3 county government agencies that are drug and alcohol related. That's Montgomery, Bucks, and Chester counties. We just had a conversation yesterday with Delaware County, so we're hopeful to be doing some work with them.
Great.
But basically, we then started doing more prevention work, not with children, but with their parents. So whereas initially our programs went right into addiction. Like what's happening with heroin. Back in 2011, this is when everything was escalating. So we talked a lot about that, but then we were like, let's kind of step back a little, and also, we still talk about those things, but also talk about how we can lay the foundation for healthy conversations in the home and have meaningful dialogue with our kids, being curious as a parent instead of punitive, and not freaking out and putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first, and that sort of thing is so helpful. So that's how more of the prevention work with schools kind of came into it. But we love talking about particular substances. We talk a lot these days about cannabis and alcohol and benzodiazepines and stimulants and opioids, of course, and everything in between. And vaping has changed a lot of the landscape for our kids.
And I think the more things are legal that are harmful, especially to our children, the more difficult I think it is for us as adults and professionals to kind of navigate and, you know, walk this slippery slope with our kids.
Well, it changes the perception that it's harmless, that it must be okay for us. It's legal. It's medical. That's the air quotes. You know, and so we know that, especially for young people, as the perception of harm goes down, use goes up, and that is a problem for young people because their brains are still, all of our brains are still developing until we're 25 years old. That's a lot of years of very malleable brain matter that is being rewired when a substance is introduced to that young developing brain. So we really, really want parents to understand that it may seem harmless. Perhaps you didn't have any huge repercussions when you were a kid, that you're not your child. Everyone's different. Everybody's got a little bit of different brain chemistry going on. And also, the potency of cannabis is much higher now, and that is one of the substances that's used earlier on for kids. So we have a lot of concerns about that.
Alcohol and cannabis, and you know, now with the legalization of it, and you know, the cannabis, and then of course we have so many of these substances being laced with the fentanyl, which is just daunting and very dangerous.
Extremely dangerous,
for these kids. So tell us how this comes about then. You're in the school districts and you have programs. So how do you get people to come to the programs, to know about the programs? How are they informed?
So it depends on who we're partnering with. If we're partnering with the school district, then a lot of times we'll rely upon their communications or community outreach person. The school principals will send out notices. They might have a wellness series that we're part of. So those communities get to know us that way. We have a lot of social media followers. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We have a YouTube channel which has a lot of content on it these days because Zoom sort of got us there, which we're a little bit grateful for. Frankly, we weren't recording programs that much. You know, we had a few that we would bring in some cameras and actually record a presenter, but mostly those were live events pre-COVID. And that was another way. If it was at a church or a community center, there might even be flyers or something on the marquee outside that said we were going to be there on a certain date. We also have 6,000 plus subscribers to our email blast, but we want more people to know about us who aren't already following us. So the schools are a big help, but sometimes it's partnering with a college or university. But a lot of it is word of mouth. Oh, and treatment providers as well. We work with some really amazing inpatient and outpatient treatment providers who will let their families know about us as well, which is really great.
So when you do these presentations, it would be obviously yourself, and who else would be there presenting for that event?
And so sometimes we'll have one particular featured speaker. So this might be an author or an expert in the field. It might be a panel. Just last night we had a panel of experts, and sometimes I'm the moderator, or I might be presenting a little bit of information. Last night our communications manager was our moderator. She did a beautiful job. But we also love to incorporate somebody who's in recovery. So we might have experts who can talk about what they're seeing in their field of expertise. But really having that personal story, that we always survey our attendees and ask them, how did you feel about this program? Was it helpful? Inevitably, we can have somebody with all kinds of initials after their name. But that guy Ray, I loved his story. It was so moving and meaningful. If we have to humanize this, because of the stigma that you mentioned, you know, it's so important to do that.
We have to make it real and make it relatable to the general public, because so many, it's like, well, no, not my child. That's the famous, you know, cliche. Not my child. Oh, not in our neighborhood, not in our school district, which we know couldn't be farther from the truth.
No place goes untouched.
So what are some of the areas? We know it's substance use and some mental health, but I know there's a vast variety of areas that you address and touch on.
Yes, definitely. So we have a program, we just did one recently that I loved. It was called 10 Things You Need to Know About Addiction. And we didn't talk just about substances. We started off by explaining what addiction is. And really, addiction is not about drugs, it's about the brain. And so we got into process or behavioral addictions, such as gambling, gaming, sex and love, relationships, shopping, food, technology. My God, technology, right? So yes, we explained how it's really, even if you are someone who has a history of substance use, if you've put down the drink or drug and you're abstaining, that's that whack-a-mole game. Like, what else is popping up, right? A lot of times people will...
The sugary drinks.
Or I'm going to go save that person I met in the 12-step meeting. Or, you know, so it's now the relationship that becomes the addiction. It's very natural occurrence. So that's why, you know, we like to talk a lot about pathways to recovery also, so that people understand it's not just about abstaining from a substance. It's really getting at the underlying reasons that the substance was working for a while until it wasn't working. So really helping to understand those pathways. Might be inpatient treatment, might be outpatient. That sometimes is enough to help somebody kind of redirect. So ongoing support like 12-step meetings, like other kinds of mutual aid groups like Recovery Dharma, Smart Recovery. There are faith-based paths to recovery like Celebrate Recovery. So there are so many ways, and just having fun and being outside and connecting with other people who are in recovery and have trudged the road along with you. And COVID really hurt our population in that regard.
How about that?
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, with the mental health and the disconnect for people in recovery, not getting to their in-person. Zoom was a savior in a lot of forms, but
not everybody likes it.
Let's be honest, not everybody may have had access to it. Maybe all they had, was maybe their phone, and who knows if they could access a Zoom meeting, or like you said, they don't like it, it's not personal, and then now we have a rise, unfortunately, with substance use and unfortunately with mental health. And I think now we're seeing the ripple effect of what we're left with from COVID.
And overdoses are through the roof.
Absolutely.
They're higher than they've ever been. It's incredibly disheartening and frustrating and aggravating. And we can hypothesize how much it has to do with COVID, but a lot of it is fentanyl. There's a new drug on the streets, not so new, but it's really increasing in use, which is Tranq. That xylazine.
Yes, xylazine. It's resistant to Narcan.
Exactly.
So the percentage of people who can be reversed with Narcan is going down because it resists the Narcan.
Right.
So we're seeing a lot of that. Of course, we know over 107,000 Americans last year, and I don't see it stopping down. So slowing down. So I think the education of the impact of this fentanyl is just so important. So during COVID then, you had to stay engaged.
We did.
And you had to rely on Zoom. And,
we did.
And it worked.
It really has. I have to say, as much as I much prefer being in a room with people, and our community events pre-COVID would have resource tables around the room so people could pick up materials. We also had breakout groups where you could sit and talk about what you just heard. We had the meeting after the meeting in the parking lot where people would say, like, really need to talk to you some more about this, which I love that opportunity. However, having said all that, what the silver lining has been with COVID is we can do a lot more programming because we don't have to go hither and yon to present this stuff. So we actually just had, I think it's like our 112th or 13th program just since COVID.
Wow.
So in just over 2 years, we've had more than 100 programs. Our attendance is up, so more people. It's convenient.
They're home.
They can have dinner while they're watching our program.
They don't have to spend money for gas. That is another problem people are faced with.
Unfortunately, stigma too. They can be anonymous and be on there. And if that's helpful to them, then I'm glad we can provide that service to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So talk to me about your parent programs. I've heard a lot about parent programs, and you have them so many different places.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, family members make up the majority of our audience, and which makes a lot of sense to me. It's like they're concerned, they're trying to get answers, whether it's preventative or we're in the soup. They're looking for some help and resources. So we have these support groups. I mean, the support groups are not a new thing. There's been Al-Anon and Nar-Anon for decades,
a lot of years.
Which we're so grateful for, and we strongly recommend those. They are 12-step programs. And if you've ever been to a 12-step meeting, you know that there's no crosstalk. So if I share something, then you would not comment on what I shared. Parents kind of need some feedback. Like, okay, our son is out of treatment now. He wants the car, but it's actually our car. Did anybody have this decision to make? And somebody else, well, here's what worked for me. Here's what didn't work for me. We don't do advice giving, but just shared experiences that really help families, first of all, feel like they're not the only one.
I'm not alone.
This child is in prison right now, or or they've given their kid Narcan. Same here, that kind of thing. Other families. So, So we need those groups to be kind of specific for parents, especially.
Yes.
The relationship with a child who has addiction is very different than any other spousal.
Absolutely.
The parent, if your parent is the person with the addiction,
Right.
friend, peer, whatever. We parents have a very hard time with boundaries, with doing the rescuing.
Yes,
you think?
we do. Yes,
know?
we do. Because as parents, moms want to rescue our children. We want to
Absolutely.
protect them. We want to help them. We want to fix everything. And I'm
I
guilty,
don't wanna
guilty.
see- yeah.
And it's what we have been inbred and ingrained, and it's what we do.
From the moment they
From
come
the
into
moment.
our lives,
Yep.
we are their advocate, we are
Yep.
their ally, we research, they are having a lot of ear infections, we got to figure out, does he need
What's going
tubes,
on?
does she need
Right.
this?
Right.
And then where's the line? And now they're struggling with
A
a potentially
disease.
fatal disease, and I'm
Right.
supposed to have a healthy
'em out.
boundary.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And
Right.
so we really
hard.
need a lot of support to understand how to navigate this, how we can
Absolutely.
absolutely have a relationship with our child in their active addiction. It just can look different,
Right,
and
right,
and we
right.
can actually do things to raise the bottom so that they will hopefully engage in treatment sooner than
Right.
later. We don't want to wait for their bottom to hit,
Right.
and so these groups are just tremendous, and there were so many in place for the last 10, 15 years. Pam and Bill Roberts, who I know you
Right,
know,
right.
are just leaders in our world, in our
Sure.
community. They started these groups through the help and support of Care and Treatment Center
Right.
when it all started off like 15 years ago. That was a huge thing, and that was my first meeting, was going to a Care and Parent group in Plymouth Meeting. And then when Be a Part of the Conversation got started, a year later for me, I said, I want to make sure that we have a group like that to support all the families we're going to encounter.
Right.
So we
Sure.
started one called Parent Partnership in Hatboro, and that was 11 years ago. And now what we've done is, because all these groups that are out there meeting in Rosemont and Limerick and
Wow.
Exton and
Right.
Phoenixville and
Right.
Plymouth Meeting, and
Everywhere.
I could go on and on and on.
They're mushroomed. They're
They
everywhere,
have.
Kim. It's great.
They are all now, many of those leaders met with us, and there are like 15 or 16 of those meetings under our umbrella now as
great.
parent partnership meetings.
That's wonderful.
Pam Roberts came on board as our parent partnership coordinator.
Right.
So she's keeping us all connected, all the group leaders. We get
great.
together quarterly, talk about what are your families looking for? What do
Right.
they need?
Sure.
And that inspired a program we just recently did. Like, how did we never think of this before? A program called Recovery Lives Here, about recovery housing. Because so many
okay.
families and people looking for healthy, safe housing
Sure.
don't know how to navigate that. Like, what's a halfway house? What's a sober
Right.
house?
Right. There's
How much
confusion there.
structure? How long should they be there? What should I be paying? What's supported?
Right.
So we had a program just about that. That
Wow.
came from this network of parent leaders from
Okay.
the parent partnership groups.
So it's called
great.
Families in Recovery?
Parent partnership.
Parent
So,
Partnership.
right,
Okay.
right. Parent partnership are the meetings.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's a very good point, because people who are experiencing this, and like you say, maybe their child is an inpatient. Okay, they're going to be, discharged, and like, what do we do now? Like,
Right.
where do we go now? What do we do now? And we all know that everything is different. There's different levels of
Yes.
care for each individual. So to your point, I'm sure, yes, it's very confusing,
It is
again, for
confusing.
parents to navigate that and to understand the different levels and types of treatment.
Right.
So that's wonderful. So tell me about the mock teen bedroom.
Oh, okay. Mock teen bedrooms have been around for a while. We did not invent this, but it's an opportunity for families to come through, get a little tour of what we set up. Looks like a teen bedroom. It would look like a very unhealthy teen's bedroom, unfortunately.
Of course.
Because there's a lot of substances out. We're using it as a visual representation of
Okay.
here's some signs of substance use. So
Okay.
we take them through that, but we always are now partnering with that program with one that we call Parenting on Your Feet.
Okay.
Because what we recognized is parents were seeing this stuff and feeling a little freaked out. I don't know what I would
Right.
do if I found this. So we said, okay, put the oxygen mask on yourself. It's going to
Right.
be all right. We're going to talk about how to respond to this. It's not the end of the world. It might feel like it.
Right.
But if you react and not respond in a thoughtful way,
Right.
you can miss an opportunity. They
Right.
might go deeper underground.
Right.
We don't
Right.
want that to happen.
Sure. Sure.
So I love that opportunity.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. It is a good visual because it's like, uh-oh, like, first of all, what is this?
Right.
If you've never seen or been exposed to it, and to your point, what do you do from then?
Right.
So then now recently you've tapped into even another market, another area of concern, which is the LGBTQ+. So tell me a little bit about that. Of course, it is Pride Month, and there's a lot of awareness being raised about this community.
Right. Yeah, this wasn't our first LGBT program. We just held this last night, but yeah, it's just one of many populations who are at greater risk, unfortunately. You know, just because of, again, the LGBTQIA plus population also has some stigma related to it. So they've encountered, whether it's families not fully supporting or understanding, peers being pretty rough, you know. So a lot of that kind of comes with wanting to escape, and of course there we have substances that can be a problem. But we also will focus on athletes, perfectionists, high achievers, things like that. You know, there's so many populations that you wouldn't always necessarily see as being at greater risk, but that perfectionist, you know, they might want to try some Adderall that they aren't necessarily taking for their for ADHD, which they don't even have. You know, they feel there's a very well-founded belief that you're going to focus better, and it's extremely problematic if you don't have ADHD and you're using these highly addictive stimulants. You know, they're amphetamines. So, so that, and also athletes. There's not only camaraderie and wanting to kind of fit in with that peer group, but also think of the athlete who has an injury and now they're benched. They've lost their natural high, that thing that makes them feel good in a really healthy way. Now they've been given a painkiller,
medicine,
you know, and you know, this week, how many times do we hear this story, Brenda? Like
all the time.
It just
all the time.
It's just a very tenuous thing, and thankfully, people are becoming more aware of the risks around prescribed opioids. But that one really goes to the dopamine receptors much more quickly than some of the other substances that they're getting. So, so yeah.
So we just got to keep talking.
We do.
Keep educating. Keep raising awareness to all these things out there and these challenges, because our kids have a lot of them before them.
They do.
This has just been phenomenal.
Thank
and
you.
I think we could probably talk for another
hour.
I could. I know we could. But you're doing fabulous work.
Thanks, Brenda.
And it's been wonderful to have you. And if people need to contact, be a part of the conversation, if they want to learn more or they want to donate, because you are a nonprofit,
we are,
and get more information about your organization, where can they go?
Conversation.zone, Z-O-N-E. That's our website. There's a donate button. There's loads of information, resources.
There is.
This parent group, the parent partnership meetings are listed, with the calendar, all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of good stuff. Emails and all that information is on that site. So I can't be more happy that you came and spent time with us today.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hope you were enlightened by today's discussion. Kim and so many people in her organization are doing such wonderful work to help families who are struggling to make connections and be part of a conversation. I'm Brenda Shavito, and remember, you are not alone. If you or a loved one needs help or would like to donate, please visit us anytime at angelsagainstaddiction.org. I believe that together we can help save lives. Thank you.